The morning rush at Silvergate Corporation's headquarters always had the same rhythm. The sharp clicking of polished shoes, the crisp scent of designer suits, and the cold detachment of people too busy to notice anyone who didn't match their pace. Hidden among them that Monday morning was a woman few gave a second glance to. Dressed in a gray janitor's uniform, with her hair tucked under a plain cap and her hands gloved, she pushed a cleaning cart slowly across the marble lobby floor. To everyone else, she was invisible, just another worker meant to keep their world spotless. What no one knew was that beneath the disguise was Evelyn Monroe, a name whispered across boardrooms, a force behind billion-dollar deals, and the true owner of the very company these employees served. She hadn't always been wealthy, nor had life been kind. Evelyn had grown up the daughter of a maid, often watching her mother return home exhausted, undervalued, and disrespected. Those memories stayed with her, burned into her heart, fueling the drive that had made her the first black woman to build Silvergate from the ground up. Yet, she knew money and titles could create blind spots. Too many CEOs sat far removed from the reality of their employees' behavior. Evelyn wanted truth, raw and unfiltered. That was why she had decided to step into her mother's shoes, wearing the same uniform, pushing the same cart, mopping the same floors. On her very first day, undercover, the experiment began. As she bent to wipe a streak on the glass near the reception desk, two junior associates strolled by, their laughter echoing. "Careful with the glass, lady." One sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Wouldn't want you to smear it worse than it already is." The other smirked. "Imagine working your whole life just to end up scrubbing floors. What a waste." Evelyn's hand tightened around the cloth, her knuckles whitening beneath the gloves. She kept her face neutral, but inside she was making note, not of the insult, but of the culture it revealed. As the day continued, she noticed the dismissive glances, the impatient sighs when she pushed her cart into the elevator, the way people spoke at her, but never to her. By lunchtime, she had collected more evidence of arrogance and disrespect than she had expected on the first day. But one encounter struck harder than the rest. In the executive lounge, as she quietly emptied the trash, she overheard three managers laughing about the new cleaning lady. "Did you see her shoes? Ragged," one said. "If she can't afford proper sneakers, she should at least polish them." Another chuckled. "Probably can't even spell Silvergate, yet here she is working for it." Evelyn's heart ached at the familiarity of their cruelty. She remembered her mother facing similar ridicule decades earlier, and here it was again, recycled, alive in her own company. She finished her task silently, but as she left the lounge, her resolve grew firmer. This disguise wasn't just revealing hidden truths about her employees, it was awakening something deeper within her. She had built Silvergate to be different, a place of respect and inclusivity. But what she was seeing threatened that vision. What she didn't yet realize was how far some of her staff's arrogance would go, or how dramatic the fallout would be once the truth of her identity finally surfaced. For now, Evelyn pushed her cart onward, blending into the background, all while preparing to shine the brightest, most blinding light on those who thought she was nothing more than the cleaning lady. The next morning, the woman everyone thought was a mere cleaning lady arrived before the sun had fully risen, dressed again in the same worn janitorial uniform. But behind the tired eyes and modest clothes was no ordinary employee. This was Eleanor Brooks, the CEO and majority owner of the company, a woman who had built the business from the ground up, only to hear rumors that her staff had grown arrogant, dismissive, and blind to basic decency. She had decided weeks ago that she would go undercover to witness the truth for herself, but nothing could have prepared her for the cold indifference she had faced from her own people. As she carried a mop and bucket down the hallway of the company's headquarters, she could already feel the tension in the air. Whispers followed her, eyes rolled, and one group of assistants snickered openly as she passed. "Don't smear the floor like last time." One of them sneered, their voice dripping with sarcasm. Eleanor pretended not to hear, but inside, she was cataloging every insult, every act of disrespect, every sneer. In a meeting room, she was told to clean. Two managers entered mid-task, tossing papers carelessly at her feet, as if she were invisible. "Pick that up, would you?" "You're already down there," one of them laughed, not realizing that the very hands they mocked had signed his paychecks for years. Eleanor stayed silent, continuing to scrub, her heart heavy, but her mind sharpened with resolve. She was not just testing them, she was learning who deserved to remain in positions of trust. Throughout the day, she endured more of the same. Interns smirking, executives brushing past without acknowledgement, and even a receptionist who waved her away from the elevator like she was unworthy to share the same space. Yet in the middle of this storm, there were moments of light. One young analyst quietly thanked her for tidying up after spilled coffee, and another employee held the door open when he saw her struggling with a cart of supplies. These small acts of kindness shone like stars against the darkness, proof that not everyone had forgotten humanity. By evening, Eleanor's back ached. Her uniform was damp with sweat, but her mind was alive with clarity. She now knew exactly who among her staff had compassion and who wore masks of professionalism while hiding rotten hearts. What none of them knew was that their behavior had been carefully observed, not by a cleaning lady they thought beneath them, but by the very person who controlled the future of their careers. Day 3 of her undercover role was when things truly revealed themselves. Eleanor had taken up her post in the executive floor, wiping tables and organizing the break room while conversations swirled around her. Here, among the highest ranks, she expected at least some level of courtesy. Instead, what she discovered was arrogance on full display. One senior vice president, sipping a glass of imported water, complained loudly to his colleagues about having to deal with uneducated staff, his eyes cutting briefly toward Eleanor before dismissing her entirely. Another director laughed and bragged about yelling at his secretary, calling it character building. Eleanor listened, her heart sinking as she realized how far removed some of her leadership had become from the values she had built her company upon: respect, empathy, and dignity for all. Later in the day, a female executive purposely spilled her tea onto the floor, smirking as she stepped aside. "Clean it up, that's your job, isn't it?" she taunted. Eleanor bent down, silently, every movement steady, though her mind was recording every face, every word. She wanted to see how far they would go, and the cruelty seemed to have no limits. Yet, amid this ugliness, there were glimpses of true character. A young intern approached quietly and asked if she needed help carrying supplies. An IT technician, rushing between servers, paused just long enough to smile and say, "Good morning." These small gestures reminded Eleanor that there was still hope, that not everyone had been infected by the culture of superiority. That night, she returned to her penthouse apartment, the disguise still hanging heavy on her shoulders, and stood before her mirror. She looked at her reflection, the powerful CEO hidden beneath the clothes of a cleaner, and felt both anger and sadness. But also, a fire burned within her. They thought she was invisible, that their words and actions would never reach the top. Soon, she decided the masks would be ripped away. And when that moment came, those who mocked her would learn the cost of forgetting humanity, while those who showed kindness would be elevated to the places of honor they truly deserved. By the following week, the mood in the office had shifted from subtle disregard to outright hostility. Mariah noticed that the whispers were no longer confined to hushed corners. They were loud enough for her to hear. She moved so slow. No wonder her kind never gets anywhere. One young analyst sneered while she polished the edge of a mahogany table in the boardroom. Another laughed and added, "I bet she doesn't even have a high school diploma." Mariah bent down, scrubbing the carpet where someone had deliberately spilled coffee in front of her path. She knew the stain was intentional. It was their way of pushing her, of testing how far she would bend. Each day felt like a stage where they rehearsed their cruelty, and she was their chosen target. Her patience, usually her greatest strength, was being pulled taut, like a rope on the verge of snapping. She reminded herself of her father's voice: dignity isn't given, it's kept. But even dignity had its limits when layered with insult after insult. The worst came on a rainy Wednesday. She entered the executive floor balancing a mop and bucket when she heard mocking laughter echoing from the corridor. "Careful. Folks, the CEO's not here today, but her replacement has arrived. The Queen of Mops," said Derek, one of the senior associates who carried himself with a smug arrogance that disguised his mediocrity. Everyone erupted into laughter, clapping sarcastically as if it were some comedy act. Mariah froze for a moment, her back straight, her knuckles whitening on the mop handle. That single laugh stabbed deeper than any words before. The room spun for a second with the weight of humiliation, but she forced herself to keep walking, eyes fixed on the floor, lips pressed tight. She would not let them see her break. But the fury burning in her chest told her that her charade could not last much longer. Later that afternoon, while wiping fingerprints off the glass doors, she overheard something that jolted her decision-making. A group of managers were discussing the upcoming board meeting. "The CEO is coming down hard on us for the quarterly losses," one of them muttered. "If only she saw how lazy the cleaning crew is. No discipline, no pride. Maybe she should spend less time in her penthouse and more time down here with the little people." They laughed, their words thick with disdain. Mariah felt the sting of betrayal more than insult. These were the very people she had trusted to steer her company forward, the ones she had invested in, mentored, and given opportunities to. And now, seeing her only as a janitor, they revealed their true colors: entitled, cruel, and blind to the humanity of those they deemed beneath them. As she sat alone in the supply closet that evening, the hum of the fluorescent light above her felt like a spotlight on her thoughts. Her heart pounded as she realized her test had gone far enough. The company she had built wasn't just about profits, it was about culture, respect, and values. If this was what her leadership team had become in her absence, then something was broken at its core. Tears of both anger and resolve welled in her eyes. She clenched her fists and whispered aloud to herself, "Enough. Tomorrow would not be just another day of mopping floors. Tomorrow would mark the moment when the masks came off and the truth came crashing down on everyone who had mistaken her silence for weakness." The day of the executive board meeting arrived, and the energy in the air was electric, though none of the employees understood why. Many of them noticed that the new cleaning lady had not appeared in recent days, and some even joked that she had been too slow and likely fired. Whispers traveled through the office corridors as staff members carried papers, adjusted ties, and prepared to impress the leadership. The boardroom was filled with polished suits, expensive watches, and the confident chatter of managers who believed they were about to present their quarterly reports to a CEO they had never met in person. Everyone had heard of Ms. Lillian Hayes, the elusive and fiercely intelligent woman who had taken over the multinational firm after her father's retirement, but none of them had actually seen her face. They expected a powerful figure, a woman surrounded by assistants projecting wealth and dominance. When the doors swung open, the entire room fell silent. To their utter disbelief, in walked the same woman many had laughed at just weeks earlier, the one they had mocked for her cheap shoes and slow mopping. Dressed now in a tailored navy suit, her natural curls styled with elegance and an aura of absolute authority radiating from her every step, Lillian Hayes entered the boardroom like a storm contained in human form. The shock was palpable. Mouths dropped open, eyes widened, and nervous coughs broke the silence. The managers exchanged panicked glances, realization dawning painfully. This was the CEO, the woman who held every one of their careers in her hands. Without acknowledging their stunned faces, Lillian placed her leather portfolio on the polished oak table and calmly took her seat at the head, the seat reserved only for the company's leader. Then, with a measured smile, she finally spoke. "It's fascinating," she said, her voice steady yet sharp, "how people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching." The color drained from several faces, particularly those who had sneered at her when she carried trash bags or struggled with cleaning supplies. Lillian recounted with piercing clarity the exact incidents she had witnessed: the mocking laughter, the cruel jokes about her appearance, the dismissive attitudes when she asked for simple directions. Each word hit harder than the last. The staff squirmed in their chairs, their earlier arrogance replaced by sheer terror. The room felt smaller, suffocating even, as the weight of their behavior crushed down on them. This company was built on values of integrity, respect, and humility. Lillian continued, her voice rising slightly, but what I saw was hypocrisy, cruelty, and ego. If you cannot treat a cleaner with dignity, you are unworthy of representing this organization. A heavy silence followed, broken only by the shallow breathing of those who realized their jobs hung by a thread. Lillian's eyes swept across the table, steady and unforgiving, before she concluded, "Today, this company changes, and it starts with holding people accountable." The next morning, the staff came in to find the office unusually tense, as though something was in the air that none of them could quite name. Rumors had already started spreading. Security had escorted the cleaning lady into the executive elevator the night before, and no one had seen her leave. Some whispered that she had been caught stealing, others that she was connected to someone important. By 9 o'clock, a formal email arrived summoning every department head and supervisor to the main boardroom for an urgent leadership meeting. The summons alone was unusual, but what was most shocking was that lower-level staff, including the ones who had mocked her, were also instructed to attend. When the group gathered in the gleaming boardroom, the room buzzed with nervous energy. At the far end of the polished oak table sat the chairman and a few senior executives, their expressions unreadable. The door opened, and in walked the same woman they had all sneered at the previous day, the same one with the worn cleaning gloves and mop bucket. Except today, she wore a tailored navy suit, her hair styled neatly, her posture commanding authority. The murmurs rose into a stunned silence. She walked to the head of the table, her heels clicking against the floor, and stood there with calm poise, letting their confusion build. Finally, she smiled faintly and spoke, "Good morning. I suppose many of you remember me from yesterday, though you may have mistaken me for someone else." A heavy quiet fell over the room. Several of the employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoiding her gaze. She continued, her voice strong yet measured. "I am not here to clean your floors. My name is Marilyn Carter, and as of the past 5 years, I have been the CEO of this company." Gasps echoed around the room. Some jaws dropped, others froze in disbelief. One manager blurted, This can't be true," before trailing off as the chairman nodded solemnly, confirming her words. "Yes," Marilyn went on, her eyes scanning every face. "I came here undercover because I wanted to see how the culture of this company really works, not the version polished for reports and presentations, but the truth. What I found was telling. Many of you treated me with respect, but far too many of you mocked, dismissed, and insulted someone you assumed was beneath you. That attitude, whether directed at a cleaner or a client, is unacceptable in this company." Silence hung like a weight. The very people who had snickered at her, called her invisible, or brushed her aside now sat pale-faced, the blood drained from their expressions. Some tried to shrink into their chairs. Marilyn's tone hardened. "A company is only as strong as its respect for people, every person. Yesterday I was a cleaner to you. Today I am your CEO. But in truth, I have always been both, a woman who knows what it's like to do the hardest, lowest paid jobs, and also the one who makes the biggest decisions. If you cannot treat both with dignity, then you have no place here." The gravity of her words sank deep into the stunned crowd. The silence was thick, broken only by the nervous shifting of chairs. Some employees stared down at the table, ashamed. Others looked like they might faint. Marilyn let the weight of the moment linger before she added, "Decisions about accountability will be made. But more importantly, we will be rebuilding this company's culture starting today." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp. "You should all consider this your wake-up call." And with that, she sat down at the head of the table, every eye fixed on her, not as a cleaner anymore, but as the leader who had just changed everything. The next morning, the building buzzed with a different kind of energy, an anxious silence that hung over the staff like heavy fog. Everyone knew that the cleaning lady who had been mocked, ignored, and humiliated was none other than Amara Johnson, the CEO of the entire corporation. The news had spread faster than wildfire. By now, not just employees but clients and investors had caught wind of the revelation. Amara walked into the lobby, not with the mop and bucket she had carried days earlier, but in a sharp, tailored suit, her presence commanding respect. The same receptionist who once shooed her away stood frozen, her face pale, eyes lowered. Amara didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. Her quiet steps across the marble floor spoke, louder than any reprimand could. In the conference room, every manager sat nervously, waiting for her to decide their fate. She looked around the table, her gaze resting briefly on those who had laughed at her, those who had dismissed her, and finally on the few who had shown kindness. Her words were steady but cutting. Respect is not about titles, uniforms, or positions. It's about humanity. If you cannot honor that, you cannot represent this company. Some faces burned with shame, some with fear, while a few reflected tears of remorse. By the end of the day, several staff members were dismissed, and others received training in ethics and compassion. A reminder that arrogance had no place within her walls. Outside, as Amara left the building, the same security guard who once ignored her rushed to hold the door, his expression apologetic. She gave him a small nod, not of anger but of grace, because she knew change began with accountability. And as she stepped into her car, the city lights reflecting on the glass, Amara knew the lesson had traveled far beyond her company's walls. What began as mockery of a woman in a cleaner's uniform had become a story whispered in boardrooms and break rooms alike. That true leadership hides not in power, but in humility.